I've been the chair for from the establishment of the Building Construction Industry Working Group, and I think from the onset we've tackled two of the biggest areas, which is basically having the building code revised so that we have a standard for the country, and then secondly having it legislated, which we've now seen the bill passed. I think the next steps for us are basically we need to have institutions to help our professionals be accredited in the region, such as an Institute of Engineers or an Institute of Architects. We already have an Association of Surveyors, and we need to have other bodies to vet our professionals, ensuring that they're able to meet the standards, to design to the standards we are now trying to enforce and regulate in the country. And that's only possible if we have a body that assesses their capabilities and qualifications. So I think one of the biggest pursuits of the BCIWG is to basically support the establishment of an Institute of Engineers in the Solomon Islands. I think that leads to us having another body such as an Institute of Architects, which I think will also need to be supported. We can't run it as the chamber. It's not for us to do. It falls outside of what I believe is our main driving goals, but we can endorse such bodies to be established as a priority. And I think the BCIWG, what I see is, I think there are members of the BCIWG who will be required to participate in pursuing the establishment of such bodies. So establishment of professional bodies to represent the professionals in the industry is one. I think secondly is we need to have facilities in place to ensure we can check that standards are being met. And by that I mean we need improvements in our labs, as far as testing of soils, testing of metal, steel, bars, testing of even timber. Because while we currently utilize these materials, we're not able to categorize where they sit as far as standards are concerned. So structural timber, we are not able to grade our own timber to determine where they can be utilized. So for those sort of materials, we often have to import them. So we need to start seriously working with MID to establish labs that can help us to ensure we meet the required standards with our local material. I think the other aspects we're also looking at includes basically reaching out to our local universities to see how their programs can be developed to cater to the shortfalls in the industry, such as the construction, civil, structural. I do know Sinu's developing their diploma in civil engineering course. How do they get from that to an engineering degree course? What's the pathways that they need? As well as, I think, to a large extent, BCIWG could probably be an avenue of trying to establish internship programs to work with private sector companies through membership and see how we can pave way for up-and-coming graduates in the industry to get more work. So I think that's a bit loosely how I see it, but the two main agendas at the moment are basically how we can check the quality of the materials and ensure testing is adhered to, and two is basically trying to get our professionals accredited in country and also the affiliations internationally. I think it's taken a while to finally get the building standards bill legislated. There's been quite a few consultations, but to this day I don't think everybody quite understands what it means for our communities, our people in the Solomon Islands, the impact it will have. And there will definitely need to be a grace period for people to adjust to the changes in the construction standards with the actual implementation. 2 years is, I would say, neither too short nor too long. I think as a consultant, the sooner we start familiarizing ourselves with the standards, the better. And I do know clients are willing to take up enforcing this as soon as possible. However, I think we also need to recognize that there are still very big gaps in the code that still need to be addressed. These gaps pertaining to factors for designing as far as seismic and wind that need to be accounted for. To a larger extent, there's serious concern still around the implementation across the country. And as a layman term, one size doesn't fit all. And one part of the country can't utilize same factors as another part of the country when they don't have the same conditions, whether that's wind speeds, cyclonic activity, seismic activity. So I think the MID and the government as a whole still have a long way to go in sort of addressing these concerns. But I think 2 years is definitely a reasonable time frame for them to implement those um, efforts to address these concerns. I think the document itself, and by document I mean the revised building code, already highlights key aspects that need to be brought into effect quickly, which is basically an advisory committee to the minister and to MID as a larger body on how best to utilize the building code and how to regulate it. But as a starting point, I would say we need to start focusing on trying to um, address the shortfall in manpower to inspect and ensure quality and compliance to standards that are currently documented in the building code would be my starting point. And there's many ways we can do that, but I think first and foremost there has to be cooperation in understanding that the document is relatively new, cooperation in the fact that while it definitely directs you towards the utilization of the revised building code, there are definitely areas that we need to work together with our the respective ministry responsible to make sure that we align ourselves in making our best efforts to implement what is needed. Um, I would probably go as far as saying that respective consultants and construction firms who are utilizing the document must first understand what they are supposed to be working to. Being a new document, I think a lot of people will take time to understand what is being asked of them. And again, just going back to previous points I raised, the implementation and understanding how they can best facilitate their efforts to ensure compliance with the document. So cooperation, I think, will be key. It's not going to be easy. There will be lots of things that will come out of this. We may see fluctuations in pricing, cost increases until we find a stable benchmark on prices for materials, because we're going to be needing to improve the standard of the materials so that they meet the building code standards. Hardwares are going to need to start sourcing materials that meet the requirements of the standards and the code. So there's got to be cooperation with people understanding the need for this to take place. And eventually we will find a benchmark or a level stabilized pricing across all hardwares that we should see very little differences between the hardwares. That's the hope. Obviously, regulating that the materials are the right quality and meet the right standards will be another task in itself. And who does that, whether that's MID or someone else that's dedicated to doing that task, will also become critical. As a construction company or consultant, they have to understand that they also take responsibility for ensuring the quality of the products they utilize on their jobs. And if it's a problem that they are unable to source locally, then this has to be something that is clearly informed to the respective ministries. How can we improve it? How can we enable it so that everybody across the country has access to quality materials and ensures quality construction?